Mom, Dad, I humbly suggest you save some money and shop Amazon for back to school. It's for my growth, meaning my body's growing at an alarming rate. And clothes you buy me this year will be very small very soon. Plus, the clothes I love today will be out of style tomorrow. But at least your wallet doesn't have to be my fashion victim if you shop low prices for school at Amazon. Hopefully this is helpful. Amazon. Spend less, smile more.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, we are going to be talking about the veto power that some men give women over their work schedule and how that really transforms certain kind of marriages. And before we get to that, please do subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was the We Do What We Want marriage and how it leads to sexlessness when her drive drops, which could be a whole different way of thinking about the first part of your marriage. And it was based on a video I did that got a lot of views. So hopefully you will listen to that and subscribe. And I have almost 170 subscriber episodes. So that's a lot of listening for $8.99 a month. And it's all incredibly brilliant. No, I'm kidding. But hopefully it's interesting. Hopefully it's a little bit interesting. Okay, so this was something that a client told me years ago, and I don't remember who it was, but they said that they read that a very successful man gave his wife veto power over his work schedule. And so if anybody knows what this book was, I tried to look it up. And I didn't get anywhere, but apparently some very successful business guy wrote in a book that the secret to his success, having a successful marriage and a successful career, was that his wife knew that if she said no to something, a conference, a trip, a work dinner, then he would just stay home and he wouldn't give her any bullshit about it. He would just be nice and stay home, and that's just how it would go. And he said that she very, very infrequently used it, but that when she used it, he just stayed home. And this is a very interesting type of thing, right? Because many people are really, okay, so obviously many guys are preoccupied attachment that listen to my podcast, but many women that listen to my podcast are also preoccupied attachment because the avoidants are not listening, right? Because they don't care about relationships at that level. They're not going to spend 15 minutes listening to this when they could listen to something about their hobby or about news or about sports or about whatever, men or women. So the point being, the preoccupied attachment person is frequently upset by their partner's schedule. And so the avoidant man, he avoids intimacy with work, hobbies, friends, a million different things. And sometimes the preoccupied attachment woman feels that she is last on the list, just like the preoccupied attachment man feels with the inverse, So everybody that's listening, most of whom are preoccupied attachment or fearful avoidant attachment, some of whom are secure. But the point is, everybody who is the person who focuses more on the relationship, that person feels worse when the other person prioritizes other things. Even though frequently they themselves prioritize other things, by the way. So like the preoccupied attachment woman definitely prioritizes her kids over the marriage, but she just doesn't see it like that usually. I mean, in most cases, sometimes she doesn't. But in most cases she does, but she just doesn't really see it like that because she thinks she still values the marriage, whereas she doesn't see evidence that her avoidant partner prioritizes the marriage at all because he always just does whatever he wants. And it's very, very difficult when you have young kids especially, which is why I have a post called The Young Mother Stage and Why to Come Home Early from Work. It's very, very hard to be a young mother, a mother of young children rather, or a young mother that is a mother of young children, either way, and to be alone with the kids, especially if you've had any sort of childhood trauma or you do not have family help or you are depressed or you have postpartum depression or anxiety or postpartum anxiety. And it's really hard to be alone with the kids. So this is the point at which I advise guys to really try to come home early whenever they can. Of course, this is also the time when men are trying to make it in their career, because they're very anxious. They have all these mouths to feed. So you can be an anxious guy, but also avoid an attachment, by the way. Attachment style has nothing to do with whether or not you're going to have anxiety or depression or anything like that. Those are disorders, and attachment style is totally different. So the worst for this is an avoidant guy who's anxious. Not anxious attachment, avoidant attachment man who has generalized anxiety disorder and specifically financial anxiety. So this guy will be at work like all the time and never come home before, a certain time that is always very late. And the woman feels completely abandoned. And he takes travel and work opportunities and conference opportunities and all of this stuff. Now, a lot of these guys say that they do not take as many opportunities as they would if their wife wasn't upset about it, which may be true, but frequently they don't tell her about that because they feel like then they're going to be told that they're just trying to brag about something that should just be a baseline thing. So I always tell the guys, tell her whenever you do not go to something, tell her for sure. Or if you really want to up your game, give her the veto power over your work schedule. And so many guys are terrified to do that. They're completely terrified. They think that she will just tell them to stay home all the time. And she won't. I mean, that's just it. Like, she won't. Unless she's like totally borderline and everything is a shit test. Go back to my podcast about shit tests. And she is like really, really out of control in terms of her own attachment and abandonment issues. That's probably not your wife, statistically. Statistically, your wife is somebody who has preoccupied attachment but can function in the world, right? She has some friends. She has some family. Does she have a job or volunteer or like people? Like if there's anybody that she's gotten along with for more than a few years straight, if it's only a few years, that's not that great. But like, does she have any relationships from like earlier life? Is this a person who she's got a childhood friend or high school friends or, she's able to maintain long-term relationships with people, then probably she's fairly mentally healthy in terms of unlikely that she has borderline personality disorder, which is the one that guys wield the way that women wield narcissism. Like every third guy is a narcissist. That's not true. That's not true. And also every third woman doesn't have borderline personality disorder. Now, if the woman does have borderline personality disorder, then she's constantly making tests. She's threatening suicide. She's saying she's going to leave you all the time. Everything's very volatile. You're up until the middle of the night screaming at each other. And, what does it say about you, by the way? You're not a paragon of mental health in that scenario. And you can listen to my podcast about how narcissists and borderlines find each other. But let's say you're not in that situation. If you are, you should already be in couples counseling and individual counseling, and you should listen to that podcast, and you're in a different situation. But the situation I'm talking about is where your wife cries sometimes because she says, "Do you even love me?" Right? So we're more in that situation. Do you really love me as much as you love golf and work? What would you even do? Would you even care if I died? Would you even care if I died? All right, so that is like a preoccupied attachment woman and you're an avoidant man. In that situation, she's relatively within the norm, of, yes, she's insecurely attached, but she's not fearful avoidant. If she's fearful avoidant, which is the one that's in borderline personality, then things will get more dramatic. But let's just say she's preoccupied attachment. I know we had to have a lot of qualifiers, but, I do like to be somewhat specific. She's preoccupied, you're avoidant, and she's making you therefore listen to this podcast because otherwise you're not listening. But so anyway, you got to give her veto power and she will not abuse it. Try it out. Say to her, I thought of this idea. I'm terrified about doing badly at work, but then I thought about it and you love me and you're a good person. So you don't want me to fuck up at work either. Plus, I do, earn a living for us. So I'm going to do something where you could be assured that I put you as a priority, which is I'm going to give you veto power. If you look at my schedule and there's something you absolutely cannot do, then you could say, please don't do that. That will be the veto power and I won't do it. I like to hope you wouldn't do it very much, but I put it in your hands. Or you could even say, well, try it, and see. If you have to, but I wouldn't recommend saying that. But if you have to, because you can't even choke it out otherwise, then do that. And what usually happens in this case is the woman basically never uses it unless she really, really needs to. And in that case, by the way, she would have done it anyway. She would have told you that you couldn't go and begged and screamed and cried. Remember, you're still of free will. You can still go. Like that's in parentheses. That's an open secret is that you could still go. But what it would mean is basically a gauntlet thrown down that I'm not anymore doing our agreement. And you know what? She would be very upset. So this is a gentleman's agreement, even though it crosses gender. And it said she is going to respect you and care about you if you respect her and care about her. And those go very well. That's a virtuous cycle. And the interesting part is that all the guys, and by the way, there could be preoccupied attachment guys out there who are in this situation where the wife says they work too much, and that is a preoccupied guy with a woman who's somewhere in between secure and avoidant. She's going to be avoidant when she's older if you don't watch out, but right now she's secure. So the women that still care if you work travel, if they tend avoidant, are the women with young kids. So if she is really, really independent, but then with the young kids, she feels completely isolated and alone and frantic, then you should also do this, even if you're the preoccupied attachment guy. So point being, people want to care for each other and they rise to the occasion. Frequently, like if your teenager is disrespectful, they still have certain rules that in their own head of times they will and won't be disrespectful because they don't hate you, truly. And so there's certain things that they won't do. So like, for example, maybe they'll be disrespectful to you in private, but not in public. Or maybe be in public, but not if your boss was around or your mom or something like that, right? People, and you think that too. You think, oh, my teenager, they're being kind of, a dick because they're a teenager. But, they're a good person underneath. That's what most parents think about their kid. So your kid rises to the occasion by having certain lines that they will not go past because they still want you to think of them as a good person, which they sense that you do. It's the same exact thing with your spouse. If you think of them as a good person internally, then they're 1,000 times more likely to act that way and to put your best interests at heart. I have lots of guys that I work with, and if they say to their wife, listen, I really do think that this thing is a good career move, but I leave the ball in your court whether I should go, she'll say go. And if they would have said, I'm going to go to this thing because it's a good career move, she would have said, you are so self-absorbed. You don't even know that it's, Kimmy's dance recital. What's wrong with you? This is why I shouldn't even be here, which sounds like the fearful avoidant, but it's really just an angry, preoccupied attachment, because Kimmy's dance recital is fucking big. That's like big news. So point being that the same woman who would have been very, very upset and felt hurt and betrayed, if she is given some sort of agency where she feels like a partner in your career and somebody that you trust to make a good decision, will frequently, it's just like when they do those studies that say, if you say to somebody, what do you think your salary should be? They end up saying something lower than what you would have paid them. So it's like the same thing. You're expecting your wife to say no to all these things. Meanwhile, she doesn't. She actually does better than you would think because she's so happy to be considered, and it's the same thing really, in the inverse. So if the guy's preoccupied attachment and he says to you, you put work first and you're the avoidant woman and everything. And you say to him, okay, which nights do you want me to come home early? He'll probably be like, well, you gotta work. So, well, what do you think? He'll be so weirded out. He doesn't want to actually fuck with your career. He just wants you to take him into account. So if you say, all right, if you tell me a night to come home early, I'll come home early. Usually he'll be like, well, I guess we could play it by ear. I guess maybe Friday when you already come home early. Like, most people do not want to destroy your life, If you're married to somebody that does, that's usually somebody with a personality disorder, whether that's narcissistic or borderline. And then you should be talking to your therapist about that. But most people are not married to somebody who wants to hurt them. They understand that your financial and career success and your self-esteem are inextricably linked to the success of the marriage overall. And of course, even their financial success if you're married. So most people do not want you to get fired. That's the truth. And so since they don't know what goes on at work, they err on the side of caution. They don't fucking know. Maybe you are supposed to be there from sunrise to sunset every single day. So the point is that when guys actually do this, they end up working more, ironically. But, they don't have to because she's happy. So then they may want to come home early. So probably, really, they go to more things. I should restate it. They go to more events than they thought they would have been allowed to go to under the veto power rule, which is probably as many as they would have been to before. Except that they would have been fighting, they would have been crying, there would have been, the woman saying, God, when are you ever going to understand there were only young ones, the children, and I'm so alone here, and whatever. So, and if that all sounds very familiar, then you ought to be in couples counseling, by the way. And if you think this is a good idea, then discuss it with your spouse, And if your spouse says to you, yeah, well, you know what? You are in that category. You're in the category of people that I actually don't think have my best interests at heart. Well, then you got to hightail it into couples counseling immediately. Because this is not a marriage that can survive, because that's truly the problem. And it may be why he's working so much in the first place. Truly. Yeah, of course, takes two. He's avoidant, likes work, whatever. But you acting all volatile is not helping anything. So I hope that this gave you a lot to think about and was interesting. And if it speaks to you, then this is something that you could be considering executing in your own marriage. You could try a lot of different things. That's what I try to do with this podcast, is give you a lot of different ideas, some concrete, some reframe, some cognitive, some behavioral, some emotional, some looking in at yourself, some trying new things with your partner. And between all of that, maybe you can truly incrementally improve your marriage, as actually many people reach out and tell me that my posts on my podcast have helped them have a better marriage. And I always like hearing those messages. And thank you so much whenever anybody writes them. And anyway, this is one of those in that category. And I will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.